The night shift at St. Mary's Asylum was never an easy task. The desolate corridors echoed with the distant moans of the tormented souls that had once filled its rooms. I, Michael, had taken the job as the night watchman, thinking it would be a quiet way to make a living. Little did I know, the asylum had a sinister secret waiting to be unearthed. On my first night, the air was heavy with an unsettling stillness. The flickering lights cast eerie shadows on the peeling wallpaper. As I patrolled the dimly lit hallways, the oppressive silence was broken by the distant shuffle of footsteps. I dismissed it as my imagination, chalking it up to the typical noises old buildings make. As the night wore on, I began to feel an inexplicable sense of dread. The asylum seemed to come alive with whispers that slithered through the air. I checked my watch, realizing it was only 3 a.m. The hours dragged on like a never-ending nightmare. A sudden draft chilled the air, making me shiver. I turned to see a door creaking open at the end of the corridor. With trepidation, I approached it, the floor creaking beneath each cautious step. The door led to a long-forgotten ward, where the patients with the most severe afflictions were once housed. The room was freezing, and my breath hung in the air like a ghostly apparition. The flickering fluorescent lights revealed rusted beds with tattered restraints. As I scanned the room, a guttural growl echoed from the darkest corner. My blood ran cold as I strained to see what lurked in the shadows. Two piercing red eyes gleamed from the blackness, fixated on me. A twisted figure slowly emerged, its limbs contorted in unnatural angles. Its skin, a sickly shade of gray, clung to the skeletal frame. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding in my chest. "Help me," it croaked, a voice like nails scraping against a chalkboard. They never let us leave. My rational mind told me it was a delusion, a trick of the mind induced by the oppressive atmosphere of the asylum. But the terror that gripped me was undeniable. The figure advanced, its movements jerky and disjointed. With trembling hands, I fumbled for the radio to call for backup, only to be met with static. The lights flickered faster, casting the room into chaotic shadows. The entity drew closer, its voice growing louder, a chorus of anguished souls begging for release. I sprinted back through the corridor, the wails of the tormented echoing behind me. The once familiar layout of the asylum now felt like a labyrinth designed to ensnare the unwary. Panic set in as I realized the hallways were changing, leading me in endless circles. Exhausted and disoriented, I stumbled upon the entrance, only to find the heavy doors sealed shut. The wailing reached a deafening crescendo, drowning out all rational thought. I was trapped, caught in the clutches of a nightmare that had bled through the walls of St. Mary's Asylum. As the first light of dawn painted the sky, the haunting cries ceased. The asylum returned to its facade of desolation, leaving me to wonder if it had all been a hallucination. But deep down, I knew the night shift had gone horribly wrong, and the asylum held secrets that should have remained buried in the shadows of the past. The night hung heavy over the abandoned textile factory, and I, Sarah, found myself alone on the dreaded night shift. The once bustling looms now stood motionless, entangled in cobwebs. I had taken the job as a security guard, thinking it would be an easy way to pay the bills. Little did I know, this desolate place held a darkness that would soon consume me. As I patrolled the echoing halls, the creaks and groans of the decaying machinery seemed to form an unsettling symphony. The air was thick with an otherworldly chill, and a feeling of unease settled in the pit of my stomach. I dismissed it as the typical discomfort of being alone in a vast, silent space. My rounds led me to the basement, a place rumored to be haunted by the spirits of workers long gone. The flickering light bulb above cast long dancing shadows on the cold concrete floor. As I reached the heart of the basement, a distant hum resonated through the darkness, a spectral melody that sent shivers down my spine. Against my better judgment, I followed the sound to a forgotten corner where a decrepit piano stood, its keys coated in a layer of dust. The hum seemed to emanate from the instrument itself, as if the ghostly hands of an unseen pianist caressed the keys. The air grew colder, and my breath materialized in wisps as I stood there, mesmerized by the eerie serenade. Suddenly, the hum transformed into a haunting melody that echoed through the cavernous space, It was beautiful, yet filled with a melancholy that clawed at my soul. I scanned the shadows, half expecting to see the ghostly figure of a musician. Instead, the keys moved on their own, dancing to an unseen hand. As the spectral music reached its crescendo, the factory came alive with a chorus of whispers. The voices of the long-departed workers blended with the haunting melody, creating an otherworldly symphony that reverberated through the walls. Panic seized me, and I stumbled backward, desperate to escape the supernatural performance. The once silent looms now rattled and shook, as if responding to the ghostly orchestra. Shadows twisted and contorted, taking on ghastly forms that seemed to dance to the spectral tune. I fumbled for my radio to call for help, but all that answered was a distorted static that mirrored the chaos unfolding around me. I sprinted through the labyrinthine halls, the ghostly symphony following me like a relentless specter. The factory seemed to warp and shift, trapping me in a never-ending maze. The whispers grew louder, their words unintelligible yet filled with a desperate urgency. In a final act of desperation, I burst through the factory doors and stumbled into the cold night air. The spectral symphony faded behind me, leaving only the echoes of distant whispers. The factory stood silent and still, as if reclaiming its desolation. As the first light of dawn painted the sky, I looked back at the abandoned textile factory, now just a looming silhouette against the morning haze. The night shift had gone horribly wrong, and the ghostly echoes of the past had woven a tapestry of terror that would forever haunt my every waking moment. The sterile hum of fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I manned the security desk at Fairview Hospital during the graveyard shift. The empty hallways echoed with an unsettling emptiness that only a hospital at 3 a.m. could possess. I stared at the clock, the hands moving at an agonizingly slow pace. A sudden chill crept down my spine as I heard distant footsteps echoing through the silent corridors. I dismissed it as the settling of an old building, but unease lingered. As I checked the security cameras, a flicker of movement caught my eye, a figure in a tattered hospital gown. My heart raced as I rushed to investigate, finding myself in a dimly lit corridor where the overhead lights swayed gently. The air felt dense, suffused with an otherworldly energy. The figure stood with its back to me, facing a flickering light at the end of the hallway. "Hello?" I called out, my voice barely rising above a whisper. The figure remained motionless. "Are you lost?" No response. The only sound was the distant hum of the flickering light. My footsteps echoed as I approached cautiously, my breath catching in my throat. The figure slowly turned, revealing hollow eyes that seemed to hold a profound sadness. "Help me," it whispered, a voice that carried the weight of 1,000 regrets. I stumbled backward, the air growing colder. Shadows danced on the walls, contorting into grotesque shapes that seemed to writhe with unseen agony. The hospital's once familiar surroundings now warped into a nightmarish tableau. The intercom crackled to life, emitting a distorted voice that sent shivers down my spine. "Abandon hope," it echoed, a chorus of spectral whispers accompanying the ominous message. I raced back to the security desk, hands trembling as I fumbled for the radio. Static. Panic set in as the voice on the intercom grew louder, a cacophony of tortured souls pleading for release. The hospital's emergency lights flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to claw at the walls. I stumbled through the darkened halls, each step heavier than the last. The once white walls were now smeared with a sickly, oozing substance that seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy. As I reached the exit, the hospital intercom blared with a final, bone-chilling message. "You can't escape the inevitable." The doors slammed shut behind me, sealing the hospital in an oppressive silence. I emerged into the cool night air, the hospital looming behind me like a malevolent specter. The night shift had gone horribly wrong, leaving me haunted by the echoes of a supernatural presence that lingered within the hospital's forsaken walls. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure to smash that like button and subscribe for more scary horror stories. See you on the flip side.